Okay. So welcome to the MEDIN Standards and Guidelines Workshop. It's nice to see at least one of you here. First things first, I'll just get the course instructors to introduce themselves. So I'm Rosanna. I work 50-50 between MEDIN, which is the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, where I mostly work on the guidelines and delivering workshops like these. And also for BODC or BODC, the British Oceanographic Data Centre, where I'm a data manager, managing data for a variety of government-funded research projects. So I really like data. I guess I'll hand over to Summer if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Summer. So I'm a data manager at DASH, the Archive for Marine Species and Habitats Data. So I quite often work quite closely with MEDIN and obviously Rosanna, and it'll either be me or Hannah, who's also on this call, who's a data officer, who, if you submit your data to, you'll be talking to us. So thank you.
I'm Madeleine and I'm the project officer for the community-led marine biodiversity monitoring project. I think I'll be quite a familiar face to Lindsay and anybody else that will be watching this in the future.
Excellent, thank you. So I think you're probably mostly familiar with Zoom at the moment, but you don't have to have your video on if you don't want to. You can mute or unmute if you want to ask a question. There's the raise hand function, which we probably won't need to use since there's not too many of us on the call at the moment. So just feel free to interrupt if you've got a question, or use the chat. And obviously people might be arriving late or leaving early or dipping in and out, and that's fine. And I think I'll get the rest of you to introduce yourselves now, if that's okay. So if you want to just say your name, which community group you're a part of, and what kind of data you've been collecting or are hoping to collect, and a little bit about what you're hoping to sort of gain from this course, that would be great. So we'll kick off with Lindsay.
Hi, yes, I'm part of South Sky Seas Initiative. So we work in South Sky locks, but I'm actually based in Lockhouse, so we do a bit over in the mainland as well. We've got an underwater ROV, which we've been taking videos with, not so much through lockdown, but we've got quite a bit of data from 2019 that we need to process and get through onto all the databases and presumably through to MEDIN if possible. I'm also been doing some sort of kayak surveys with GoPros as well, so and we're hoping to do a lot more of that as we go through into next year. So again, the more we can understand about where the data goes and how it gets stored, then it'll help us when we're collecting it to know quite what we need to collect and make sure we've got all the data in the format that we need to make it easier for it to go all through the flow of MADI spreadsheets through into MEDIN. And I don't know much about MEDIN at all, so that's why I'm here today.
Excellent, thank you very much. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself as well, just so you don't feel left out?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I also work for DASH as the data officer. I'm just sitting in today because this is my first MEDIN instructional conference, and yeah, I'm just here to learn and watch.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we've got the schedule. So today we've got our welcome, our introduction to MEDIN. Then Summer's going to take you through the data lifecycle, a little bit about general data management best practice and data quality checking. And then I'll be back for some stuff about controlled vocabularies. Tomorrow we've got the data guidelines. So we'll be focusing on getting data into those spreadsheets. And then on Wednesday, it's all about the discovery metadata. So that's that. Any questions on that before we move on to the MEDIN stuff? Can you all see the new presentation? Good. Just sort of check before I keep going. Okay. So this presentation's all about MEDIN. MEDIN is the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, and our tagline is measure once, use many times, because we want to make sure data are reusable and accessible for people to reuse in the future. But before MEDIN, there were over 200 holders of UK marine data from all sorts of different industries, each with different ways of managing their data, all collecting different metadata in different ways, also different levels of storage, which may or may not have been appropriate or particularly secure for long-term storage of data. They all have different discovery mechanisms, like their own portals, or you might have had to email people to get access to the data. They might have had different ways to download the data, and all in different file formats. Some people might have made data products and maybe didn't make the raw data available at all. There'd be lots of different licenses to say how the data could be reused, if at all. Sometimes there might have even been a cost associated with receiving the data. So this wasn't very sustainable, and MEDIN was created to provide a solution. So MEDIN provides data guidelines which ensure standard metadata. MEDIN also replaces the hundreds of data holders with data archive centres and a couple of local data holders as well. But all of the discovery metadata is collated in one place and in one standard format. So it's much easier for users to find what they're looking for and discover whether it's freely available, and if it is, how to get it. So MEDIN has been in operation since 2008. It's best described as a long-term open partnership of UK organisations. We have 15 sponsors, the logos you can see at the bottom of the screen, and 59 partners. We're hosted by the National Oceanography Centre, and we work across lots of different sectors. So our partners are from research, government bodies, charities and commercial organisations. So we've got lots of different people working with us. The goal of MEDIN is to improve access to and management of UK marine data and information. So in simple terms, to make data sharing easier. This is achieved in a number of ways. So we've got a network of partner organisations who are experts, who sit on working groups to tackle data issues as they emerge. We've got the centralised portal, which acts as a hub for access to UK marine data, and the standards and guidelines, which are drafted by the experts and ensure that data on the portal are findable and reusable. And all of this is marine specific. So MEDIN is a hub for UK marine data. MEDIN holds the discovery metadata, which allows data to be discoverable on the portal, but the data themselves are stored at our network of data archive centres, or DACs. So our network of specialist and accredited data archive centres provide stewardship of a broad range of marine data. So their objective is to curate, upload and retrieve data and make it searchable, and they provide expertise which feed into the tools that we create at MEDIN. So we have 7 data archive centres, including DASH. So DASH is the main one for most of the data that you guys will be collecting, I think. So they are the Flora and Fauna and Habitat DAC for MEDIN, but we have lots of others as well. So depending on the type of data you're collecting, you might have a different DAC to submit to. The benefits of MEDIN DACs are security. So they have offsite backups and things like that. So if you lost your copy of your data, then they'd be able to provide it back to you. They're experts in their field of marine data, so they can help with drafting data management plans, and they know exactly how to deal with your specific type of data. They can apply access and reuse conditions to your data. So if you don't want certain groups of people accessing your data, or you don't want it to be reused for commercial purposes, for example, then they can do that. They future-proof the file formats. So the files would be transferred to a standard format to keep them relevant and readable in the event that a proprietary software falls out of use. You can version data sets, so you can update the data set, but still know exactly what's changed. They can link added documents for added value and added information. And they can also offer other services like DOIs for data citation. So we have all these data sets stored at DAX, which can all be discovered centrally from the MEDIN portal. This is made possible by the widespread adoption of the Discovery Metadata Standard. So the DAX feed their discovery metadata into the portal, and so do the local data holders. And users can then search in one central location for over 16,000 data sets from over 600 organizations who are the originators. So many of these data are public funded data available under the Open Government License, so they can be reused by anyone for free. So the Discovery Metadata Standard, there are a number of standards that already existed. So we have the international standard ISO 19115, which describes the metadata required for any data collected at a geographic location on Earth. So the EU took this and made it EU specific and called it Inspire. The UK took that and made it UK specific and called it Gemini, and then MEDIN took that and made it marine specific. So MEDIN is compliant with Gemini, Inspire, and the international standards, is just marine specific. So the Discovery Metadata Standard is what records all the records on the portal are validated against. It's just the single point of access to find out about marine data sets. So the data guidelines provide guidance on what metadata is needed for reuse. They're drafted by the DAX and other experts, and they speed up ingestion into the DAX and make reuse of data and data sharing much, much easier. They contain advice on general metadata, detailed metadata, and the data themselves, and are organized on the website into different categories. And there are different guidelines for different data collection methods. All are available for download from the website. I think Maddie's already collated all of the relevant guidelines for you and put nice little sheets on the top so that you can put all of your data into there nice and easily. But we'll be talking about the guidelines a lot more tomorrow. So, all sounds great in theory, but is it working? We currently have over 16,000 data sets accessible through the portal from over 600 organizations compared to the 200 in 2008 from a variety of different disciplines. In terms of data reuse, we had over 1.6 million requests for data at the MEDIN DAX in 2020 to 2021. So this is a graph from a study that OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and GOOSE, the Global Ocean Observing System, did using MEDIN as a case study. So you can see how the data from different fields of use can go on to be used in several different actions. And I've provided the link to that paper if you're interested in learning more about that. MEDIN also recently commissioned a cost-benefit analysis of itself, which found a benefit to cost ratio of 8 to 1. So for every £1 spent in MEDIN, it returns £8 worth of value. Some of the major benefits were making it easier to find data, making it easier to make better decisions because of having access to more evidence, and also being able to stay more organized. So one analogy we like to use is being stuck on this desert island. So in theory, we're this person that's stranded on this desert island. There's lots of data available that might be useful to us, but we don't know about it. We don't know it's there. So MEDIN provides the tools for us to be able to find what we need and escape that desert island. Any questions on MEDIN? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Do you want to have a quick little 5-minute break or continue straight on to the data life cycle?
I'm happy either way. Dana.
Yeah, same.
I don't mind.
Okay,
Yeah,
should we,
fine.
should we press straight on then? I'll stop sharing.
Perfect. That's me, isn't it now?
Yep.
Perfect. Having trouble finding it now. There we go. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. So I'm just going to give a very quick overview about data management. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the data lifecycle, consisting of planning, creating and storing, and data quality, such as quality assurance versus quality control, spotting errors, and data quality standards. So the data lifecycle looks a bit complicated, but it's not too bad, I promise. So I'm going to start with planning. So typically you think, oh, I'm going to go out and do a survey. So you're going to plan for your marine survey and you're going to plan for your data management. So acquiring. So in this specific instance, you're going to use your handbook of community-led marine biodiversity monitoring handbook. And that's, you're going to follow the specific methodology for your particular survey using that. So that's how you get your data. And then once you've got it, you then want to organize and analyze it. Maybe you want to store it locally, create some sort of data validation and verification steps, and then create a MEDIN metadata record, which we will talk, go into further about later. You then maybe want to share your data, maybe want to archive it specifically with a data archive center, and then you may need to maintain your data sets if you find any inaccuracies or anything, in which case you'd have to version it, which I'll talk about a bit more in a second. So planning is very important when it comes to data management. I know from firsthand. So you're obviously going to plan your activities, sources or surveys and data types. I know you've got something called a community data journey for robust data. Any changes in your data need to be tracked, need to be versioned. You need to think about where you're going to store your data and the file formats you're going to store it in, which is really where MEDIN comes in at MEDIN DAX. You're going to want some documentation and descriptions, and that's where metadata comes in. It's information that it's data that describes data, in case you didn't know what metadata was. And then you're going to want somewhere to archive it, agreements under which license it can be published, and eventually publication. So who's responsible for this planning? specifically in this case, it's going to be the community data representatives and verifiers. So sources for data creation. So this is the fun part, right? So this is where you go out and you do your surveys. It could be a transect survey, drop-down video, quadrat, and diver survey. So this is the fun bit. So when you create your data, you then need to follow some sort of standard. And consistency is really important, because what we want is good data that you can pick up and reuse and know exactly what it's talking about. So you've obviously got this community-led marine biodiversity monitoring handbook, which tells you methods, how to do it, how to calibrate things. So that's part of the consistency within the survey. So yeah, some of the things during the survey are going to be instrument setup, reference frames, and then of course you've got your validation and your quality assurance and quality control procedures, which is really important that each data set has these procedures in place and it's done consistently. You've then got your metadata profile creation and maintenance, which is a way for the data set to be viewable. And then we also got something called controlled vocabularies, which Rosanna is going to go into later. But just to give a very quick, talk about that, it's basically a way to know that you're both referring to the same thing, know that you're you're not talking about completely different things there. So that's extremely important. So MEDIN data guidelines. So these guidelines within MEDIN have been designed by stakeholders and data managers and experts in the field, and they are there so that you can input your data and you can record everything that needs to be recorded for someone to pick this up and know exactly what's happened and be able to reuse it without a problem, without having to go back to the data provider. So the general metadata is project and survey information generally. And that's common to all guidelines. And then depending on the survey type, it then gets more specific when it gets onto further tabs. It might not make much sense at the moment, but it will make more sense tomorrow when we go over the guidelines. So file store, versioning and file naming. So I don't know about anyone else, but when I was at university, I had final copy, final copy, which, at the time you think, oh yes, I know exactly what that is and what happens to it. But it comes to a year's time and you think, oh my gosh, what version is the final version? And it's a nightmare. So generally, it's best to avoid new versions wherever possible. And when you do need a new version, make sure you've got some sort of naming system in place and you know exactly what's happened. So yeah, you need a way to know exactly which is the latest version. In Dash, I think we use version 1, version 2, but it's also good if you put a date in it too, so you know exactly what date it was last updated. And then once you decide on a naming format, you need to then name files consistently. Yeah, there we go. That's an example of a good one. So data quality. So the quality of the data you collect will be influenced by the survey design. Following the guidance within the handbook, the methods and survey forms fully will maximize the quality of your data. There are 2 steps you can take to help increase the quality of your data. Validation. This is the process of checking all survey data are complete and that the data satisfy set formats and values. And verification. This is a manual process where you can check the species and or habitat identification is correct. And then there's a little link down there to the handbook. So quality assurance versus quality control. So we hear these phrases being chucked around, but what do they actually mean? So quality assurance, QA, covers every stage of a production process. So every stage in sort of the collection and archiving and validation, etc., to make certain that the data produced are of the intended standard. Oh yes, acquired, processed, implemented. Yeah. So things like camera setup to ensure that high quality photographs are collected and it's consistent methodology. Location, so same GPS is being used, and then that has the same sort of spatial CRS, which the coordinates are adhering to. And then the quality control is about the output, so ensuring that the data that is already and there is adhering to a set of measures to ensure that it meets the specification and is in line with requirements. So assessing data quality. You can do an assessment in a few different ways. So you can carry out a simple qualitative assessment by looking for things from previous experiences with similar data. You can do a detailed quantitative measure, so documented framework of process, based on general knowledge, guiding principles or specific published standards. You can address it at content level or at specific fields, and consider how effectively the data represents the objects, events, and concepts it's designed to represent. So there's a little quote down here. The purpose of data quality assessment is to understand the condition of data in relation to expectations or purposes, or both, and to draw a conclusion about whether it meets expectations or satisfies the requirements of those particular purposes. So to me, I wouldn't be able to spot anything that's wrong here. So the point is that we've got rows of data here. It's all numbers. Looks, fairly all right. Obviously, you're going to be a bit more familiar with it, but just looking at these rows of data, you would have, they look reasonable, right? They look like they could be correct. But when we actually map the data, we realize, hang on a second, we found a fish on land. That's very strange. One of those new land fish. So essentially like this, that's one great way to check that something has gone wrong when you found a fish on land. Obviously, the coordinate is not quite correct there. But so there's many different methods can be used to assess data quality. Definitely recommend mapping out your coordinates, or at least a subset if you can't map all of them. And then when you do identify problems, this needs to be documented clearly. So this is just a list of sort of checks. So is it accurate? Is it complete? Is it consistent? Is it credible? Is it reliable? Yeah, and is it understandable? So just a list there really of so when you spot something that might not be quite right, for example, yes, I found a fish on land. So don't just delete it. So at least you need to flag it, and then it needs to be investigated what's happened. So there's some examples here of quality control flags that you can put along with it, so we've got the code and description here. So a number code for like good values, or no quality control or bad value or anything like that. So be aware of removing valid data as outliers, because you do get inconsistencies in nature that don't necessarily follow a pattern. Definitely not good to investigate things first before anything is deleted. And then to assess data quality, and then take corrective action. And yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for me or anything? Stop sharing. I'm going to take that as a no, so I'll hand back over to you, Rosanna. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone need a break yet, or are we happy to keep going?
Happy to keep going if everyone
Please
wants.
keep going.
Okay. Right, I will reshare my screen then. Can you see that? Okay. Very good. Okay, so this presentation will be all about controlled vocabularies. So these are one of the tools we can use to make data sets consistent and standardized to make sure they can be reused and that all of the information makes sense to everyone in the same way. So what we mean when we talk about a controlled or a vocabulary is a set of words in a language that are familiar to a person. Usually develops over time and is a fundamental tool for communication and acquiring knowledge. So we encourage the use of controlled vocabularies because we're divided by common language. For example, the same word can mean different things to different people, depending on where you live. So these items of clothing between UK and American English. If I said bass, some people might think of the fish, others might think of the beer. And similarly, we can use different words to refer to the same thing. So Australians call them thongs, we call them flip-flops. So if we're going to describe specific scientific concepts like species, for example, we need to be able to define them unambiguously so that the terms can't be misinterpreted and so that the data can be reused by others as it was intended to be used. So controlled vocabs remove ambiguity, support terms with explicit definitions. They allow us to publish online and make things a resource for all. So we use controlled vocabularies to make the implicit become explicit. MEDIN use controlled vocabularies in discovery metadata for things like categories of data, geographic coverage, formats of data files, things like that. And also in the data guidelines for categories of data, geographic coverage, oh, I said that already, for models of instruments, organizations, quality control flags, and vessel ID codes for survey vessels. Some of the vocabularies we recommend are worms and MS bias, which is the UK subset of worms. So those are for species. We've got ICs for platform codes, laboratory reference codes, and developmental stages. EPSG for coordinate reference systems, and the NERC vocabulary server, which can be accessed through CDataNet or the British Oceanographic Data Centre, which provides lots of different controlled vocabularies for different things. So links to the main vocabs are all on the website, MEDIN website. They're categorized into administration in general, marine archaeology, and marine environment to make it easier to find the vocab specific to your interests. And if the link supplied doesn't go directly to the vocab, the table name will be supplied in the details field. So the NERC vocabulary server, accessed through the BODC or CDataNet, lets you query all of the NERC vocabs. These include vocabs for things like instruments, platforms, sea areas, geometries, among many, many other things. You probably won't have to worry about using this search too much because in general, when a controlled vocabulary is recommended in the MEDIN guidelines or the discovery metadata standard, there'll usually be a direct link to that vocab, or in some of the tools for discovery metadata, there'll be drop-down lists and things that you can just pick from directly. But for context, this is where those lists come from. And if you ever did want to search for something outside of those lists, if those lists got confusing, then you could come here. So this does provide several different options. If you already know the vocab that you want to search in, then you can use the search for term in a vocabulary collection, put your vocab ID in the little box and then search for whatever you're looking for. If you aren't sure which vocab you want to search in, then there's two different options. You can either search for a term across vocabulary collections. So, for example, if you were looking for your ROV model, you could type that in the search for term across vocabulary collections, and it would return any vocab collection where that term appeared. And then you would be able to select from the options which one you think was most appropriate. I can do a little walkthrough of this later as well, so it makes a bit more sense. The other option would be to search for vocabulary collections. So if you know you want to search for an instrument, then you could type in instrument into there. Actually, I don't think that would return what you think it would, but I think it has to be device, but that's a whole other story. So yeah, different ways to search for different terms or collections. So this is an example of the P02 vocabulary, which is for keywords. So you have the table down here where you've got the identifier. So that's a unique identifier for this term in this vocabulary. You've got the preferred label, which is sort of your short description, an alternative label, which is an even shorter description, and the definition, which is your full definition, hopefully unambiguous as possible, and then your date when it was last updated. So this is an example data set. We've got some metadata and headers up the top. How do you think we could make this data set less ambiguous with controlled vocabularies? Anyone got any ideas?
Specify the instrument, see if there's a defined way of, I guess, recording the seabird CTD.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else?
The salinity, it's not really got any unit, so
Yeah, that's a good one.
it's not quite clear what it is.
The time zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one, actually. I don't think I'd even clocked that. Well done. So yeah, there's also a ferries mentioned, so we could identify that in a vocab for platforms. We've got the instrument, which you got. We've got the units for things, which we could define, and also the parameters themselves. So for ship reference codes, it's C17. For instruments, it's L22. Units are P06 and parameter codes are P01. Again, you don't have to remember which tables are for what, because they will be defined in the data guidelines anyway. So this is what it would look like once you've sort of filled in those things, and then you'd be able to click on any of those links and it would take you directly to what that term means and take you to that unambiguous definition for that term. So Useful discovery metadata includes descriptions of categories of data measured. We recommend the P02 vocabulary, which is the CDataNet parameter discovery vocabulary. It's accessible through NVS and CDataNet. And you can search directly from the MEDIN website, or there's a hierarchical view as well. Things to be aware of. Some vocabs, links on the MEDIN vocab page will bring you to the vocab list page, not to individual vocabs. We are working on changing this though. I think we have changed it for as many as we can. Searching may not be intuitive, so definitions may have text in different orders to what you might expect. For example, for parameters, sea temperature would be temperature of the water column, not water column temperature. And you would have to search for the terms in that order as well. So it wouldn't return anything if you had searched water column temperature. Yeah, so the terms have to appear in the same way. Vocabs are no use if they're not correctly referenced. So the best practice is to provide that URI, that unique reference number, the term code, and the vocabulary that it came from. So different vocabs may have similar terms, but different use cases. So you might need to research which is the best one for your needs. And you might also encounter unusual terminology. So if you ever need to add terms, then you can contact me or the appropriate governance group and we can get terms added for you. All of the vocabs that we recommend are live and governed vocabs, so you can add terms. So on to coordinate reference systems. Data costs money to sample, so without knowing where and when a measurement or observation occurs, they don't really have any value. So we need to be able to provide a trustworthy and ambiguous position for the samples. So I'm going to show you some numbers and I want you to let me know if you think they are unambiguous enough. So what about that one?
Ambiguous.
Yeah, ambiguous.
Okay, good. What about that one?
Ambiguous?
Really ambiguous, yep.
I don't know what lighthouse.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no information there at all, really. What about that one? That one looks a bit better.
Still ambiguous.
Still ambiguous. So yeah, none of these are satisfactory. And that is because latitude and longitude are not unique. Coordinates only define a position unambiguously when the coordinate reference system that those coordinates were recorded in has been identified. So a coordinate reference system is basically a way of breaking down the Earth's surface into a grid based on a mathematical model of the Earth's shape, which is called an ellipsoid, and then referencing those positions on that grid to a known point on the Earth's surface, which is called a datum. So the issue is that because the Earth is not a perfect sphere, there are different ellipsoids and different datums that are more appropriate for different places on the Earth. So, for example, this guy wants to survey Big Ben, so he needs to know its coordinates. He's got two very helpful friends with GPSs. So this guy's got one set of coordinates. This guy's got a slightly different set. So I think it's just these numbers that are slightly different. But can they both be right? And the answer is yes, they can. So as long as the coordinate reference system that those coordinates came from is identified, then they both come out with Big Ben, and that's all fine. The problem happens if you plug them into the wrong coordinate reference system. So then they come out slightly above or slightly below the actual position of Big Ben. So this can have pretty big implications in real life if you get it wrong. So there's an example of platform drilling. A company wrongly applied the meridional grid in their directional software, dug 12 dry wells, lost capital expenditure of $2 million, obviously did quite a bit of reputational damage and had to redo the work. Another example in construction, the company had proposed position for a new subsea manifold on ED50 datum. The contractor had assumed the positions were in WGS 84 and drilled in the wrong place, which resulted in a $500,000 fine, reputation damage, and they had a contract dispute. So pretty important to make sure you quote your coordinate reference systems. Have you got any questions on controlled vocabularies or coordinate reference systems or anything? Doesn't look like it. So would you like me to do a quick little walkthrough of the Odyssey search? Okay, so I'm gonna probably ask you for what you would like me to show you exactly. Let's open up the search. So I'll walk you through this page as well quickly. So on the MEDIN website, there is a page on controlled vocabularies. So if you ever are unsure about what vocabulary to use, you can come here and you've got lots of different links to specific vocabularies. Otherwise, you can click the Odyssey client to the NERC vocab server, which will take you here under normal circumstances. I think it's currently broken. But so that will bring you out to here. What would we like to look at searching? We could do some keywords or some parameters or some instruments.
What about the blue ROV that you're using, Lindsay? We could have a search for that, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be on.
Okay, we can have a little look. So it's just an ROV, yeah? Let's have a look and see what we've got. Lots of things designed for ROV applications.
Gosh, the speed that you just scrolled through that, I could obviously understand. I just couldn't follow.
So I'm looking at like what's highlighted and whereabouts.
Yeah.
So if it's in the description, then it's probably not it. But if it's in the preferred label, then it might be. Got quite a few different things. Let's try.
Would it maybe be spelled out? Not, yeah.
Mm.
I think you forgot the R.
I did.
Yeah.
No. It might be in a different vocabulary if it's maybe identified as a platform rather than a tool. Let's try. Oh, I already looked at that one. In the platform category. Is it? Is that the one? Okay.
That's the one, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so it's in B76. Let's have a little look in there. Sorry, I should probably be talking through what I'm doing. So I'd searched in the term across vocabulary collections. So then it provides all of the vocab collections that have the term remote in them somewhere. So obviously we'd searched in L22 before and come across some sensors that are designed for application on remotely operated vehicles. And then I came to B76 platform models. So an RFV is a type of platform that you might attach things to. So you can look in there, and then it gives just a brief overview of the search results in that thing, in that collection. And then down the side here, you've got all of the options for the collections that have been returned. So you can click on the one that you've identified, and that goes to the full search in that collection. And then we can refind that and click on it. So then you've got your unique reference number for that term, its preferred label, and the full definition of exactly all of the sort of specifications for that instrument or platform. Does that all make sense? Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like me to search for while we're here?
I think I can't remember the specific name or the vocabulary, but there's one for, I think, small man-powered vehicles or something, which covers things like kayaks, which I know Lindsay or uses, or other people use stand-up paddle boards and things like that. So I don't know if that'd be useful just to look at another example.
Yeah, I'll see if we can find something. So I imagine it might be in the same vocabulary as that, might be 76.
Yeah, I think it is a type of platform.
So maybe not that kind of platform. Okay. So when you're searching,
Man-powered, not manned.
okay. Well, okay, maybe we'll search like that then. So then it will come up either way. So when you're searching, you can use the % symbol as like a wildcard symbol. So any number of search terms could appear between those words, but they do have to be in the same order. So let's see if that's got anything.
It'll be under the platform one, won't it? IC's platform codes.
Oh, that's helpful. Let's go into that. Oh. It's kind of weird that it's doing that.
Maybe it's having a funny 5 minutes.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because it says there's 4 terms that there should be there. But... I'm just going to check in. So this is a guideline that I've got open. So in the guidelines, it has a recommended control vocabulary or format if you've got one. So it should be in C17 by the looks of it. Maybe not. So we've got an example here that's unspecified self-propelled small boat. So that sounds right, doesn't it? 8833. But it doesn't exist in that vocabulary. No, it could be LO6 as well. Maybe. There we go. So we've got man-powered small boat, which could be a rowing boat or canoe, or self-propelled small boat. So that's things like ribs with its own engine, presumably. So that's all in LO6.
Mystery solved.
Mystery solved indeed. Got there eventually. I think it's probably helpful to know that even I struggle to find things sometimes. And I do this for my job. All right, any more questions, or would you like me to walk through anything else?
Lindsay, can you think of any other example vocabs that might be useful?
Can I just ask, what would we need to use this for? What would we need to be looking at?
So a lot of these things come into the metadata forms, which you won't have completed yet because you've been focusing on the data validation stages. And for the two data sets that you shared with me, I've been working on completing the metadata side of things and also verifying it so that we can move them along, just because you know, we've been spending a lot of time on these data sets and you've been learning those skills. So I thought once I've done those elements of your data sets, I would share them back to you and you could use them as an example to work through the metadata for your next spreadsheet that you're working on with the ROV data. But so at the moment, I don't think you would have necessarily come across the controlled vocabularies yet. But
okay.
I can share the guidance on metadata with you, and we'll probably come across it on Wednesday when we do the discovery metadata record, and I think we'll be using your Tarskavig survey as an example, so that might be useful as well for you to see how the vocabularies match up, because that will use information that will be in the metadata forms of your data set, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Lindsay, also I think it will make a lot more sense tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm going through I'm physically going to go through some of the guidelines we have to put your data into, and a lot of the fields are just going to have links that you click straight on. It takes you straight to the vocab page that you need to be on, and then you just need to search for example, what device you're using, you know, in the methodology. So I very much doubt in most cases you're not actually going to need to search for your vocab list, because you're already going to have it there. You just need to try and find your device or whatever. So hopefully it will be a bit more context tomorrow, and I'll do that. Yeah,
thanks.
And also with a lot of the areas where you need to use controlled vocabularies, what I've tried to do is in the guidance the draft guidance that I've been preparing, I tried to highlight which ones are most relevant. So that's where I remembered the what was it, the man-powered small boat or whatever that was called, because I tried to think, okay, what will groups mostly be needing to save you the hassle of trying to find it. I need to check if I've included the blue ROV. I can't remember if I have. So that's a good one to add, just so that you then can use the code straight away.
Yeah, and then just click on it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I realise it's a bit of a sort of disjointed concept at the moment, but it's sort of an important building block for tomorrow's session and Wednesday's session.
Sure, it will all become clear.
Hopefully it will.
And I guess it also relates to the marine species and how they're recorded, which is why it's important to follow the vocabulary on that, so that everybody knows what species you're referring to. Just that's obviously in a different list, not one of the ones that was on your screen.
Okay.
If there's no more questions, I guess we can finish a bit early.
Yeah, sounds good. I don't know, Lindsay, is there anything else that you want to ask? Not to put you on the spot.
Not at the moment, but I think as the week goes on, then probably there will be. But
yeah, and the thing is, we'll be coming back to this over the next months as well. So I know Summer and Rosanna have mentioned that they'd be happy to provide further support in the future if groups need it. So maybe once we've had a chance to go through these workshops and people have had a chance to catch up on them, we can maybe have a more interactive one where people are bringing their own data and answer and ask questions like that. So yeah, we can adapt and create opportunities as needed.
That sounds good.
All right, well, thank you for coming, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, thank you for my personal tuition.
You're very welcome.
And see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.